What is up, everybody? I'm NoLucksGiven, and today we are going to take a look at the 70.6 developers notes, the patch notes for May 2022. And this isn't a super large patch, but there are a few interesting new cards, spells, things like that to take a look at. So that's just what I'm going to go over in this one here. First things first, we've got two new cards, one character and one treasure being added into the game. And interestingly, these are both tier 3. So they're kind of going to be looking to impact Peter Pants in interesting ways. Two things to note is that both of these are scaling treasures or characters. I'll go ahead and read them now, but we've got Water Wraith. Let's make everything a little bit bigger here for the screen. Water Wraith, so it's a 3/3, and when a character next to me dies, I gain +1/+1 permanently. And that is going to be potentially another unit that you could scale up with Peter Pants. In my experience, it's been a little bit hard to get the Water Wraith going because it starts so small that it doesn't really have the survivability early to actually get big. However, when you can make use of the Water Wraith, it is going to be pretty strong, I think. It's definitely a tempting one, and one that hopefully I'll be able to get off the ground soon. I have a Peter Pants game coming out tomorrow on the channel on the new patch. However, I didn't see a Water Wraith until kind of later into the game, so wasn't really able to make use of it. But I do think that this is potentially something that Peter Pants could make use of, especially because if you saw my Peter Pants tier list a week or two ago, I really like to play evil units on Peter Pants. And Water Wraith definitely, I think, is good for Peter Pants, especially if you can get that early triple, because the stats will just get pretty crazy and will give you some just inherent scaling over the rest of the lobby that just allow you to be strong and look for hat ball. So I do think that this has the biggest implications on Peter Pants, though I think reason that this was included is they were trying to find ways to push summons and have summons matter, and make animals a little bit stronger. And that's definitely part of what Water Wraith is hoping to do, is you put like a black cat on both sides of it, and then you can get multiple triggers per combat, or put a Princess Peep on the right side of it, and then sheep can spawn on both sides of it. And I do think that that is an interesting angle that will potentially allow Water Wraith to be really strong, especially if you can actually combo off with it in the late game. Then you'll potentially get Time Flies and Baby Bear and Pigs added onto it, and all of that can make it pretty strong. One thing that I've found that's a little bit awkward about Water Wraith is, say you put Water Wraith in position 2. Well, now you have to choose with your like Sporko or Madmin how you're going to divvy that up. Because if you have two black cats, you probably want to put the Madmin behind both of them so that both black cats can get a little bit of a bonus. However, if you do that, then you are not going to be able to have both of the black cats pump up the Water Wraith. So sometimes what you'll wind up doing is Black Cat in 1 and 2, Mad Mim in slot 5 behind both of them, and then Water Wraith over in slot 3. Well, then you've got two black cats that have to attack before your second black cat can attack and actually trigger on your Water Wraith, and in that time it's a lot more likely to just get attacked into. So there's definitely some awkward things with positioning for Water Wraith, and they do shout out PVDR's Paulo Victor Dama de Rosa, PVDDR's article here about positioning that could potentially provide some interesting insight into that. But it's definitely a challenging unit for how you are positioning your field, and means that you don't always get all of the value out of it. that you need to, or you wind up losing some value elsewhere, which is always kind of the trick to the summon comps. There's just too many pieces, and things can just so easily go wrong, and you wind up losing a lot of potential stats, and then this thing isn't growing, or you're just playing a weaker board for the current turn to maximize scaling, which is a good thing. Having to make those decisions is a good thing for the game, but it's kind of a bad thing for Water Wraith, unfortunately. We'll take a look at Cursed Throne and talk about this one for a second. So your Royals are monsters and also have Slay +1/+1 permanently. So the implication of becoming a monster, all that I can think of is that it means that they get bonus stats from Oni King when they attack. I think that's the only current monster-related synergy in the game. So that's kind of cool. I would almost like to see your monsters have +1/+1 Slay permanently, and your Royals are also monsters. Just because then, like, I don't know. I mean, maybe that's unnecessary, but it does make things a little bit more awkward in that you want to play only Royals, and then becoming monsters is really only flavor text, which is fine. This is kind of about like adding some scaling into the game, giving the Royals comp a treasure that it can actually care about, because sometimes Royals will run into a place where you're crushing the lobby on the current board, but there's no way to continue to get stronger because you're already playing 7 units, and you can try to like triple more of your units, get more combinations, but ultimately there's not many more ways to add power to the board. So Cursed Throne, I think, aims to do that. It does give you some incentive to at least pick up some tier 3 units if you've got a Sky Castle. So that could be kind of interesting. Maybe you'll get it off of like your Romeos. That's the best tier 3. Probably don't want to be messing around with the other ones. But ultimately, what Cursed Throne is also doing, and people have brought this up a little bit and debated whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, it just adds one more tier 3 treasure to the pool. And honestly, a pretty bad one at that. I think that Cursed Throne, more often than not, it's not strong enough that it will make you want to go into Royals, and it is also, yeah, basically weak enough that you'll wind up never taking it. So it just makes it that much a little bit harder for Peter Pants or Wonder Waddle to find Crystal Ball, which maybe is a good thing. Maybe those units are already some of the more powerful heroes in the game. So Cursed Throne kind of diluting the pool is potentially a good thing for the overall balance, but I don't think you're really going to want to make use of Cursed Throne that often. Maybe on Celestial Tiger, Miri, and I can't really even, I mean, you'll pick it up if you're playing Pan Shadow and the other options are bad, but it is just like a very slow thing because it doesn't provide any additional stats, and it's really for very specific board states. However, it will make those given board states stronger, so it could be a pretty reasonable treasure. And that is all that we're going to see as far as new on-board cards, as far as heroes, characters, and treasures, though we do have a few new spells getting added in this patch. So the first one is Hermes Magic Beans, and this is a level 4 treasure. What that means, by the way, the levels, or level 4 spell, the levels on spells, you don't see them until you hit that level. So you won't see Hermes Magic Beans on Peter Pants, but you will see it on Pan's Shadow. And the magic beans are useful if you need to guarantee that you attack first. I think that this is cool. At 0 cost, it's going to get picked up a lot just because you need to cast a spell for the turn. It's kind of a buff to Cursed King in that way. But there's really times where you need some magic beans and can do some nice things with this. Interesting to note how attack priority works in Storybook Brawl. If it's a tie, it's random. If both you and your opponent have no attack priority, then the game just flips a coin. However, if there's multiple levels of attack priority, those things will go into play. So say you cast this with a Forking Rod, then you'll be able to outspeed a Sadrak. If you cast this with a Forking Rod, Mimic Chest, Wand of Weirding, and that will allow you to beat somebody that'll let you outspeed a Sadrak with Hermes Boots. So there's different ways that you can add to that. You're probably not going to want to be casting this as your spell if you have Forking Rod and Wand of Weirding, but I do think that it's interesting to put the attack first. We've seen that in the hero slot. We've seen that in the character slot with Lightning Dragon, in the treasure slot with Hermes Boots, and now we've got Hermes Magic Beans. And there are definitely going to be times where grabbing that first attack is really, really influential in terms of being able to swing a combat. So I think that this treasure is pretty cool. And yeah, a nice addition to the game. Same kind of thing with people bringing up the Cursed Throne as dilution overall, is people saying that more spells will make it harder to Hatball. I think it's fine. I think that a few more spells in the game don't hurt. We are going to see one additional targeted spell this patch, in addition to one non-targeted spell, so probably by the numbers, I mean, it's not getting that much shrunken down, because we are also getting Blaze of Glory here. Blaze of Glory is an interesting one. It is a temporary bonus and gives plus 10 attack to a character this brawl. And Hatball is even mentioned in the bottom here. So this is pretty interesting. It's a 2-cost spell, so it can get like Forking Rodded or something like that as well. And I think is going to be a really good spell in a few scenarios. One is like for the first spell that you cast on Aeon to get the ball rolling. It'll be really nice in that capacity, just to get Aeon started. And then it mentions Slay, increasing Slay odds. I think that this is going to be really nice for potential Polywoggles now that Grim Soul is out of the game. We'll get to that in a moment. And yeah, just giving Polywoggle an additional 10 attack does potentially give you a way to slay. So I do think that that is good, and will be a nice addition. It'll also, I think, pretty commonly be used with a Lancelot. It puts Lance to 19. If you can Forking Rod it, it'll put Lance immediately to 29. So it's a really easy way to grab a tier 5 treasure, or potentially grab some upgraded units. It's also a level 4 spell, so it'll kind of, don't want to say it'll take the place of Grim Soul, but that's kind of what it is aiming to do, because Grim Soul used to be a tier 4 character. A spell, a little bit tougher to find, but it is potentially there as a way to activate some Polywoggles and things like that. So I think that Polywoggle ultimately, and we'll talk about when we see the Grim Soul in a minute. Yeah, we'll talk about Grim Soul getting cut, everything that means for the game. But we got a few more ways to get some slays into here. So this is basically just a cosmetic change for the most part. Princes, princesses, and queens are now type royal. So the only queen was Queen of Hearts, but it was weird that she was a queen and didn't affect the other things that made queens matter. Just seemed like potentially an oversight or something on the part of the devs. So the big thing that this is going to change is now Lonely Prince transforms when you buy another royal rather than when you buy specifically a princess. This is something some people have been advocating for, just in terms of like inclusivity. It is a power level change for the Lonely Prince. So, excuse me, that part is interesting because this part is only cosmetic other than how it affects Lonely Prince. So this is technically a Lonely Prince buff, however, not really by much. So if you look at early game royals, you've got on tier 2, Lonely Prince, Cinderella, and Sherwood Shoreshot. And one of those was Lonely Prince, that one's not changing, and then 2 of them were already princesses. Once you get into tier 3, you've got Brave Princess, Ogre Princess, Princess Peep, Awakened Princess, Now you have Queen of Hearts as well, so we are getting one more unit there. I think that is actually a bigger one. And then you're also getting Romeo, though Romeo now triggering Lonely Prince I don't think is a huge deal because you're generally not super excited to pick up Romeo early, but it is just going to make Lonely Prince that much stronger. I think Lonely Prince was already really strong and potentially undervalued by some newer players, and now I think there's even more incentive to pick it up, even though there was already really good incentive before. Basically, I think some people might get scared away seeing that it is a 1/1. However, it's kind of like buying a shrink spell in that you are willing to take some damage to be much stronger in future turns. Lonely Prince has a little bit of luck associated with it, but now you don't even have to get as lucky because you could also potentially pick up a Romeo or a Queen of Hearts. And well, Queen of Hearts doesn't exactly synergize. Romeo's a 5/3. It's still a strong unit. You pick up a Lonely Prince and a Romeo on turn 4, and you've just spent your 5 gold to pick up a 5/5 and a 5/3. That's a pretty strong turn, and is definitely something that is going to make Lonely Prince a little bit better. And that's fine, I think, ultimately. Not going to be a huge impact. I mean, it is, because it's awkward because it's a buff on a card that was already pretty good. But maybe this will make some players value it a little bit more highly. Speaking of royals, we are now changing some, let's scroll up a little bit here. We are now going to be changing some names of units, and that is just to get the word king to only appear on royals so that it isn't confusing for newer players. So Oni King becomes Oni Tyrant, Storm King becomes Scion of the Storm, and Great Pumpkin King becomes the Great Pumpkin, which I think is what I normally called it anyways. I would always forget that it was randomly a king, and now Prince Arthur has ascended into King Arthur, so good for him. And those are all just cosmetic things, but we are going to see a few more things become mages. Copycat, Baba Yaga, and Bearstain are going to become mages, and Copycat will have some implications for sure. Baba Yaga, this is the biggest one. Bearstain, I'm just getting this out of the way because Bearstain doesn't really matter that it's a mage. It's just kind of for flavor purposes. They're like, okay, well, this isn't really an animal. This is an animal that's doing something special. So we want to give this the status of mage. But Baba Yaga becoming a mage, let's talk about that one first because that one is really big. There is a mage with a slay ability, and Baba Yaga works really, really well with Aeon, gives it a little bit more attack, means that when it does slay, you get even more discounted spells. And it's always been awkward before because Baba Yaga has been a strong unit in these spell comps, despite not being a mage. So honestly, I think this is a huge, huge buff to mages. I've already had 2 mage games where I've made a lot of use out of Baba Yaga. Maybe if I remember, I'll throw one on the screen right now. That is also going to be the video that I'm going to be showing tomorrow. Not the one that's currently on the screen, potentially, but Peter Pants. My Peter Pants game is also going to feature Baba Yagas in it, and to pretty good effect. And it is a ranged unit, that's why it kind of gets to be a mage, and just another ranged mage for Aeon to pump up. I think is pretty strong, and especially when that already has some built-in synergies with it. That is going to make Baba Yaga a force to be reckoned with in very, very specific builds, but it's the game that I uploaded on Tuesday with Ninth Book of Merlin and Trophy Hunter. That can definitely be really good. And then speaking of Ninth Book of Merlin, one of the best things that you can do when you've got Ninth Book of Merlin plus Mimic Chest is throw in an upgraded copycat and just cast a whole bunch of spells, and now you're going to be able to do so while also having that copycat be a mage itself. And that is something that I think is like even more specific. I think that this Baba Yaga change is more impactful, but it means that I now have to redo all of my Exodia videos and throw a copycat in there, because now the true Exodia is a backline full of Baba Yagas, a frontline full of copycats, Trophy Hunter, and then Mimic Chest, Mirror Mirror, Ninth Book of Merlin. That is the absolute best comp in the game now, if you can manage to put that all together. Every time a copycat attacks, it delivers a ton of spells, and then when they die, they resummon twice and cast a bunch of spells. Maybe a few Scion of the Storms in there as well to really just add it up. But there you go. I was padding that, talking a little bit so you could also see that game, which hopefully I remembered to throw in editing. And now we're going to talk about Grimsoul getting cut. And this is a, I'll move my camera up here a little bit just so that way you can read what's on the screen too, if you find that interesting. But this is definitely one that I think needed to happen. It is awkward because Grimsoul does so much for the game and is kind of a necessary evil, but there are just too many good things that Grimsoul can do. So let's take a look at this, because this is a change that they have made before, but let's take a look and see what the devs have to say. So this is a change we've made before, and once again, Grimsoul finds itself on the chopping block. Grimsoul removes more tension and drama from the game than we'd like by guaranteeing slays, and that's definitely the core of it. Like, slays are supposed to slay. They're not supposed to just pick up this other unit and then activate their abilities as if they were last breaths, because that is like the opposite of what Trophy Hunter's doing, and that's not really what slays are about. Slays are about being bigger, attacking, and slaying, and Grimsoul takes a lot of that away, and for that reason, I know it's been something that the devs haven't really loved. I don't think it's the most elegant card in the world. It's just, hey, do this thing that you would otherwise have to work for. And they want slays to try to exist in other capacities. And they can now with Riverwash Mermaid plus Lightning Dragon. And they are going to have to cut Grimsoul to see what Slay can actually do without it. It says that they'll note that this leaves Slay balanced around a card that no longer exists. So what they are essentially getting at here is last time that Grimsoul got cut, they used that as an opportunity to try to buff some more Slay things. Then they put Grimsoul back in, they kind of tuned that back, but they are potentially willing to buff up Slay again in the future, because you don't have to worry about Grimsoul. And it's kind of like this awkward thing that everything else has to balance around. They're saying that Trophy Hunter wasn't a driving force behind the change, but Trophy Hunter showing up less isn't a horrible thing. Trophy Hunter was just really easy to put together. So obviously, this is a huge nerf to Trophy Hunter first and foremost. Even though that wasn't the goal, it is going to hit him the hardest. It's also probably going to hit Muerte the second hardest, so hitting some lesser used and more sillier heroes. I think most people are probably happy about Trophy Hunter, but a little bit on the sad side about Muerte. But it is awkward. You put something like Feasting Dragon in the game, and then Feasting Dragon just becomes about how much you can use Grimsouls, and doesn't really become about actually figuring out the puzzle of how do you make Feasting Dragon work. So I definitely understand Grimsoul getting cut. I was trying to, get like some good Grimsoul videos as like a send-off. I had some that were cool, but honestly, I've got better Grimsoul videos on the channel. So if you are curious about what Grimsoul used to do, just check out any of the Trophy Hunter videos that I've uploaded over the past month or so. And you can see a little bit of why this card was a problem, but ultimately, stuff like Jormungand, it is awkward that you kind of kickstart your game with the Grimsoul rather than kickstarting it by actually slaying. And maybe we'll see more of a need for slay into the future as Grimsoul is out of there. But definitely a little bit of an awkward one because it's going to cut into the power of one of the game's bigger archetypes pretty well. And hopefully we'll find some other things to take this thing's place. It is tricky. A lot of times you'd use Grimsoul to activate Lance. I feel like the way that Lance will most commonly be activated now is going to be through Blaze of Glory. And then you'll use Blaze of Glory, activate your Lancelot, and then once Lance is activated, then you'll start to scale and get it out of control with Baba Yagas and stuff. But until that, it might be a little bit tricky to get Slay comps off the ground, just trying to use like Vampire and Chupacabra. Maybe those will come back in some capacity. I do think that Chupacabra and Vampire strategies are a little bit underrated because people are just completely unwilling to try them because Grimsoul just made getting into Slay elsewhere so easy. So this will be an interesting kind of decision that Slay builds have to build around. And now we are going to look at some level 5 and level 6 swaps. And okay, yeah, there's some other changes coming down the line, but this one is grouped together for an interesting reason here. Burning Tree is going from 5 to 6. Robin Wood is going from 6 to 5, and then 3 Big Pigs are also going from 6 to 5. And 3 Big Pigs, I think, was one of the worst tier 6 units. I almost never picked it up, even if I was in animals, even though I never really liked to be in animals. Robin Wood, I've always said, was kind of one of the better units that you could True Love's Kiss into early on, because it's ranged, pumps one of your things, it shrinks one of their things, so it's like at least a 3-for-1, potentially a 4-for-1, because it's a larger ranged unit. And very interesting here to see it move from a 6 down to a 5, and it's definitely losing a lot of a bonus here, from 15 down to 7. Those are huge numbers. However, I still think that Robin Wood is going to be very strong, and I think that this change as a whole, the 3 Big Pigs and the Robin Wood, both being pretty strong tempo units, are going to put the game in a place where level 5 is now much higher in power level, as players will not be greeding as much for XP and just playing really strong boards that are going to make getting into the late game quite competitive. So I think that that's pretty interesting. Burning Tree, I want to talk about separately. So instead of trying to weaken trees by taking away any of their stats, they actually gave them more stats in this patch. They gave Burning Tree +4 attack. By the way, huge shout outs to Alex Ortiz, who commented on my patch notes video 2 months ago, my patch notes review for March, and said Burning Tree should be a 420. I took that message, screenshotted it, and sent it to the devs, and there is a really great response from that, and because of that, we are actually seeing Burning Tree becoming a 420 in the live game. So, you know, the comments that you leave on these videos do potentially, I mean, I'm not sending all of them to the devs, but pretty cool that something that came from one of my commenters actually made it into the real game. I thought that was really awesome, and yeah, I mean, totally true. Also, Burning Tree should be a 420. It was a missed opportunity the first time around, and the devs have fixed that mistake. But have they fixed the mistake of Burning Tree? And I don't think that this change actually nerfs trees in the same way that the devs might be thinking. So basically where trees were at in the last patch is normally you would try to pick up Ashwood Elm first, then Burning Tree, and then Echo Wood. And that made it so that you were always strong, because at least Ashwood Elm is a 15-15, then you take it, throw it on the Burning Tree, then that is a 15-35, now it will be a 19-35, and not too much of a difference. Biggest thing here is it's going to cost one more, and costing one more is definitely relevant for some heroes, but for a lot of heroes, this is just a straight upgrade. Zelhua was a common hero that would play trees, and Zelhua doesn't care how much units cost. Sure, you can't find them until you're level 6, but you didn't really need them until that point anyways, unless you were making a speculative purchase. Horde Dragon is something, a hero that cares a lot about a unit being level 6, and Horde Dragon says, yes please, thank you, make all the units level 6, so that way you can triple Burning Trees now on Horde Dragon and potentially find Round Table or Magic Sword. So that is going to be a buff, I think, to Horde Dragon to pump up this Burning Tree. It is also going to be a huge buff, cannot be overstated, to Apocalypse. Apocalypse now will have to contend with other players playing strong level 5 boards, and Apocalypse might have to spend a little bit more cash on some Robin Hoods of their own on level 5 so that they don't die. But once they hit level 6, now Apocalypse can find Burning Tree, Ashwood Elm, and Echo Wood all right then and there, and that is going to be a huge buff. I'm really excited to play APOC on the new patch because I think that it is going to be quite strong, that most of the time you were just going to start with a tier 6 board ready to go of trees, and APOC also no longer has to worry about getting 3 big pigs, which is one of the weaker units it could get before. Their pumpkins are going to be a little bit stronger as they've removed a good unit from the pool as well. So ultimately, I think that this is going to be a really strong boon for APOC. It is going to make it a little bit weirder to move into things like Bearstain off APOC, which you never wanted to do anyways, but will be a slight good boy nerf now that Robin Hood is no longer in the picture. Ultimately, though, I think that trees is what you wanted to do on APOC regardless, and that just all got a whole bunch easier to do so. So, interesting change to see here. I think that Burning Tree is on 6 is also potentially good for mage comps, specifically something like Peter Pants. The main thing is that tier 6 units, that's the top, right? And if you wanted to try to build trees on Peter Pants before, you would have to find the trees through on level 5. You'd have to find the burning trees on level 5, and then you'd have to stop. And now you don't have to stop. You can keep Mix-a-Whizzling and True Love's Kissing your tier 5 and tier 6 units multiple times to potentially put together Ashwood Elm and Burning Tree combinations. It means that things like Black Prism and True Love's Kiss, which I just showcased yesterday, those are going to be more easy to put together tree comps as well, because you're just going to see more tier 6 units. So that is also, I think, kind of an interesting implication here. Trying to think if there was one other thing that I wanted to say along those same lines. I think that that's it. I did remember the other point that I wanted to make about Burning Tree going to 6, and that's about pool sizes. So for those that don't know, Storybook Brawl uses a shared shop pool, and there are a limited number of each character that you can purchase. So for tiers 2 to 5, there are 15 of each character available, enough to make 5 upgraded copies. However, for tier 6 units, there are only 10 copies of each in the pool, which can make them a little bit more difficult to find, and it's going to mean that it's just harder to put together the Exodia you can see in this game. I'm just kind of rolling a whole bunch for Burning Tree, thinking about picking up another Ashwood Elm, but I really need another Burning Tree now that I've got the Mimic Chest Magic Sword. But the way that that basically works is if one player has already gotten upgraded copies of Burning Tree or Ashwood Elm, it's also going to be harder for other players to be able to move into trees. And we see that Zelhua was also rocking some trees last time we battled against them. So that is going to mean that they wound up picking up all of the burning trees, and that's why I haven't been able to find any for the past few turns. Now, they haven't been able to upgrade an Ashwood Elm, but they've been able to upgrade 2 burning trees, which means there's only 4 left in the pool. So there's a pretty small amount that I have been rolling for, and just means that I'm not going to be able to find any, and thus am going to lose this game. Well, I don't lose this combat, but I do eventually lose this game to the Zelhua. It does mean this is technically a buff to Pumpkin. Anytime that Pumpkin would have spawned a burning tree, now it'll spawn 3 big pigs, which is probably better when you were playing Pumpkin strats. It's probably better for the most part. And Burning Tree will no longer be a unit that can spawn out of Pumpkin as just a 0-20 that does nothing, or a 0-40 that doesn't really do anything. So that's kind of interesting. And yeah, I think going to change the game in some interesting ways. I think the biggest part of all of this, though, is that these 2 units dropping down to tier 5 potentially make the game a little bit more aggressive. And will that potentially be what makes it just a little bit more difficult to get into trees? But I think once things settle down, trees could potentially be even more dominant than it was, especially on some heroes in particular. So the goal here is to seed the level 5 with more options that don't push you down just one path rather. And I think that is basically all. They're hoping that this is a buff to animal comps. I don't really see it. I think that these things that summon units in different spots are just kind of awkward for all of the same reasons earlier that I mentioned. The animals comp just really struggles with positioning in the game, that makes it really tough to play. So not the hugest fan of 3 big pigs in general. I'll probably pick it up more now that is a tier 5 unit. But there's still other tier 5 units that I'm so much happier to pick up, like 9 Sea Terror and Siren and Cupid as well, just to give myself a stronger board for the turn. I do think that Zelhua and Apocalypse are going to be the heroes most affected by this more tempo-oriented tier 5 change, but I do think there's a few other heroes that benefit as well, most notably Skip, who is going to get that additional XP and will be able to hit these large tempo units quicker than the rest of the lobby. Then also somebody like Grandmother, who is really trying to purchase XP, but really anytime you purchase XP, there's going to be bigger payoffs if you're doing that around the level 4 point in the game, because that is just going to make you stronger once you reach level 5. Some other changes that we're going to see: Doubly is getting +1/+1 and is now a 2/2. I think that is probably good. There's a lot of times where like you'd put a Doubly in front of a Fanny and it would be as strong as a Frog Prince, which actually means that it's weaker than a Frog Prince or weaker than a Crafty as well, because if the Fanny dies, then the Doubly loses everything. So yeah, Doubly a little bit awkward in that regard. Could potentially even see something in the future where Doubly doesn't lose stats if its support characters die, though nothing else really functions in that way, so we probably won't see Doubly get that treatment. But it's just so gutting if what is supporting Doubly gets attacked by like a lightning dragon or something. Dwarves, I think, definitely need some help. They still need a 4-cost unit to really be super playable, but this at least helps just to give you a few extra stats those times that you do play Dwarves, but I don't think it increases your likelihood to pick up Doubly beyond that. Friendly Spirit going to get 1 additional health. That's nice. Just gives a little bit more stats. That's always good. And then Ogre Princess is going to get an additional attack, which will make it slightly more likely to slay. I don't think that these are super relevant, but Friendly Spirit, I mean, +1 health is like it getting +2 health. So it's definitely relevant. And then Ogre Princess, if it can slay with that extra attack, obviously that can be huge. That's like just so much extra free gold. So both of these changes are good. I don't think that they're groundbreaking. It does make them a little bit stronger. They're reasonably strong units to begin with, other than Doubly, which I don't think that it changes. But the other units are good units that are getting better. I think this is like a medium unit that's getting slightly more medium well. Yeah, not too much to say, just getting slightly buffed up there. Time flies. Moving to 4 is a really interesting change. So they're doing this, they kind of say, just to balance the numbers of how many things exist on each level. This is obviously a pretty big buff up to animals, which already has a ton of things that you need to care about on tier 4. I think if they really wanted to push Time Flies, they could give it some type of alignment so that you could do something with it. Again, these animal comps are always going to struggle with just positioning and things, but if you give them enough tools, they will be able to do something. On the beta patch, they tested out Hippo, which is currently a 10-1 that gets +1 health every time you buy or summon an animal. They changed it to a 3-3 that got +1/+1, and that was really interesting and definitely pushed people in the way of animals. Maybe it pushed them into animals too quickly into the game, because you could really scale that Hippo something fierce. Think that potentially, I'm sure at some point I'll be able to do something sweet with the Water Wraith and some animals comps, and I'll definitely try it out. I mean, I always do. You guys don't wind up seeing too many of my videos where I try animals, just because I also don't think that they're like super exciting either. I had 2 Time Flies videos that I recorded on the previous patch and just never released them, because I recorded them and it's like, this game's not that exciting. My heart's not that in the commentary. I'm not doing anything that cool. I will salvage one of the clips from one of the Time Flies games in some kind of compilation thing that I'll probably put out eventually. But yeah, just ultimately not super impressed with Time Flies. The main way that you're going to get it out there is with some type of treasure, probably most notably Ring of Rage, but ultimately not something that I'm super excited about. It just needs so much to have it take some work. Speaking of that, though, a unit that takes nothing to get it to work is Cupid. And Cupid is just getting changed from a good unit to an evil unit, which I think is a good thing. It is a little bit awkward from a flavor perspective that Cupid is seen as, it's being represented here as the cherub Cupid, and is definitely like on the nicer side of things, though, yeah, like it's being used for evil here, making 2 things fight rather than making 2 things fall in love. I've always really loved the flavor of Cupid. I thought that it is really cool. But because this is totally a balance change, and it's one that I really like because Cupid is most oftenly used as a tempo unit and in sort of scam comps, and one thing that has held Cupid back is that it is a scam unit that doesn't work with the Great Pumpkin, and now it does, and that's actually exactly what it says underneath of it here. Making him evil is an upgrade to the Great Pumpkin, and just gives another evil unit to summon more evil units, but most importantly, the Great Pumpkin can now birth Cupid, and that is just going to make the pool of units that the Great Pumpkin can spawn a lot more powerful. So this is a really, really big change. I think that just changing one word on a unit has such big of an impact, and part of that is because Cupid is a tier 5 unit, so the actual pumpkin that dies will be able to potentially turn into Cupid, or Rotten Applewood, and you'll get a lot of value from your scams on both tier 4 and tier 5 units. The Cupid that dies itself could turn into a Medusa or something, and ultimately is just going to make those scam comps a lot stronger, which also is good. I think that evil units, when the evil strategies are too powerful, when the pumpkin strategies are too powerful, they do feel a little bit oppressive, so maybe we'll have to watch it. This could be enough to just put evil over the top by itself, as crazy as that sounds. So I think they will need to be watched going into the future, but it's better than those comps just not existing and just being a total trap. And hopefully, if the evil comps are too strong, then maybe we could find some additional ways to really give the good comps more incentive as well. And give some more stats to Good Boy, give some more stats to Dwarves, things like that. So we'll see how that works out in the future. Fireball is getting changed from 4 damage down to 3. Otherwise, it's basically the same. Fireball just for 1 coin. Such a cheap spell with such high impact as well. I can't remember Vulture's starting stats. If Vulture is I think Vulture is a 3/3 to start. So it still kills Vulture, still kills Queen of Hearts if they're non-upgraded units, and we'll still definitely be able to bring some heat on the brawls, but just a little bit less so, and it'll be a little bit more of a decision on when you cast it. And speaking of decisions, I have often said that Mimic Chest was the strongest treasure in the game, hidden on tier 5. And, granted, I've been saying that for probably 3-4 months, both when I had less experience playing the game and before something like Ninth Book of Merlin was added to the game. But if you think that any treasure is good, Mimic Chest is also that treasure, and then it's also one additional treasure. And obviously Mimic Chest needs some synergy to work with it, but it is, I think, potentially still one of the most powerful treasures in the game. Any crazy thing that you can do in Storybook Brawl, unless it requires 3 specific treasures, which nothing really does. I mean, maybe Hat Ball, but even Hat Ball gets better with a Mimic Chest added into it. And eventually you can lose the hat, throw in an Aeon, and then you have like Wand Mimic Ball or Fork Mimic Ball. And both of those things are ridiculously powerful. So I think that Mimic Chest probably deserves to be a tier 6 treasure, a little bit more payoff from actually completing some tier 6 units. But what's weird about this change is Mimic Chest becoming a 6 at the same time Burning Tree goes from 5 to 6. And Mimic Chest was often the treasure that you wanted to grab out of Burning Tree. Now you'd also be interested in Hand of Midas, Ambrosia, Staff of the Old Toad, things like that. But if this was the end game and you wanted to get the most powerful treasures that you could, Mimic Chest was going to be how you did that. So interesting to see Mimic move to 6 at the same time that Burning Tree does. I think that Mimic Chest is still going to be really strong, though now there are going to be more choices involved, because typically you'd look at Mimic Chest and then you'd look at a tier 5 treasure. And unless that tier 5 treasure was Staff of the Old Toad, Ambrosia, Hand of Midas, things that allow you to grab upgraded tier 6 units, you were almost always grabbing the Mimic Chest. Why mess around with Drax Saber, a treasure that you're probably going to replace in the end game, when you could just have a Mimic Chest, and then when you find that end game thing, then you get to do something really, really powerful. So now you'll have to choose between Mimic Chest and Pandora's Box. Ooh, that's a tough decision. You'll have to choose between Mimic Chest and Owls, Mimic Chest and the new Singing Sword. So those are going to be more difficult decisions to make, and we'll see what they come up with here. Singing Sword has also been changed on this patch to, instead of doubling, to just giving everything plus 15 attack in the front row. And this is definitely a nerf to trees, which really, really made use of Singing Sword before, but it is also attempting to potentially help out animal builds and sleigh builds, because they can make use of the Singing Sword where maybe the tree comps can't. And it was a little bit weird that the trees were so good with the Singing Sword and were able to just do so much with it. So I think this is good. I think the Singing Sword's a little bit underpowered. I think it'll mostly be good on the Great Pumpkin builds. Like, you know, I'm not super excited about animals, but those of course can use it. And I think for the pumpkin builds, it's about the same. Maybe you were summoning 10 10s that became 20 10s, and now there'll be 25 10s. However, on animal comps, Singing Sword is a huge buff, and it could be enough to allow these animal comps to actually do something. What animal comps are trying to do, I'm still not totally sold on, but getting a black cat that is a 1/1 or a 16/1 that summons an additional 16/1, it's pretty strong, and will definitely be stronger than some of the other things that you could have done with this treasure. So I do like that a decent amount. And we are also going to see a change to Embiggening Stone. I talked about this briefly in my video on Sunday, which was an Embiggening Stone double feature. Now Embiggening Stone affects all of your characters. It only gives them +10/+10, but it also allows you to use Embiggening Stone to actually feel like a tier 6 treasure that really snowballs and gets you strong stuff towards the late game. So it's not going to give you anything strong for the immediate here and now, but it's going to be really good, and it's going to be tough when you've got Embiggening Stone and you've got Ivory Owls. You're really going to have to take a look at, okay, what units do I currently have? How many of these are going to stick around into my final comp? And how many more turns is left in the game? Because I might just want to go Embiggening Stone if there's not that many turns, or even if there is a bunch of turns, maybe I can build a whole new board with Embiggening Stone. So I think this is definitely a buff. It says Embiggening Stone was by far the least picked level 6 treasure, and for good reason. By most games, by the time you found it, you're no longer interested in buying low-level characters, and that's definitely true. I did always think it was fun to have a treasure that only is really exciting if you find a way to get it at a different part of the game through Horde Dragon or Blind Mouse, or potentially on, with Blind Mouse typically. Wonder Waddle is what I meant to say, though potentially you could find it on Peter Pants sometimes and do some fun stuff with it. It's still going to basically be able to do all of those same things, but now it's just going to be even better. And if you can find it early on in the game, I think that it is definitely going to be a pickup too, because you can just keep swapping things in and out every turn and slowly making your board just a lot stronger while transitioning into some strong stuff in the late game too. So I think this will be a fun one and a really powerful one. It's probably going to be one of the better tier 6 treasures. Like, I don't really know when you take this over owls, or when you take owls over this, unless you already have your board set, like if you already have an upgraded good boy. And you might, because you need to triple a tier 6 character, for the most part, to get one of these tier 6 treasures. So from that point, you've invested. You might want to just hang on to the units that you've already made, and you might not really be in the market to still be buying a bunch of new ones. So definitely possible that there are times where you don't want Embiggening Stone, but the times that you do, it's going to be really, really strong. Check out my Embiggening Stone video from Sunday if you want to see some more Embiggening Stone action. That is going to be it for the meat and potatoes of this video and this patch. There are a few other things. There's a match history and some statistics on the profile ribbon of your game now, so you can check that out and just see some additional stats. You are also able to, you can see this GIF, and I also show this off a little bit in my video tomorrow, but you can mute people. It just mutes their ability to emote against you. I will not be muting emotes ever. If you ever see me in the lobby, feel free to emote against me. I don't love this change. I know that some players find emoting tilting. Know that also if you ever see me emoting in a lobby, in a video, or wherever, just because I'm having fun playing Storybook Brawl. So I think this is a little anti-fun, but I understand that emotes can give some people the wrong idea. I think that that's on those people, not on the people doing the emoting. But I do know that there are bad actors as well that do emote as a way to try to be mean or weird. And so obviously not everybody treats them the same way that I do. But there you go. You can emote. You can mute. You can mute the emotes if they bother you. And we also see a few bug fixes. Yeah, this was one that came up in a recent video, I think. Upgraded doubly, now correctly named triply. Love to see it. Princess's art for Awoken Princesses is fixed a little bit. And fixed up bugs where the hitbox for the treasure select was too big. Okay, I never noticed that one. And that is going to be it for this video for these patch notes. Definitely some interesting things that aren't huge shakeups, but there's some tiny ones that could potentially have some really big impacts. Let me know what you guys think of the patch notes in the comments down below. If you have any really cool comments, I'll forward them to the devs and you can have an impact on the game yourself like Alex Ortiz did with Burning Tree. That's going to be it for this video. If you guys would like, I also have a Discord now. You can find a link for that in the video description below. Basically looking for ways to grow the channel and then also find people to play more silly game modes and stuff like that with me. So if something like that sounds like it is your speed, check that out and come be a part of the content that you see on this channel here. But that is going to be it for me today. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm NoLucksGiven. Peace.